I'm Susan Rouse. I'm the Executive Director here at Gwen Visual Arts, and we welcome you here. I wanted to take a moment while you're here and while we have the one of the owners of the collection here to speak briefly. I know you're all probably very curious about the work and how it was collected. This is an amazing collection, so I'd like to introduce Brenda Thompson. And Brenda Thompson is half of the couple that collected this work, right? Brenda, you and Larry. Brenda and her husband Larry live on Sea Island. They've been residents off and on here for a very long time and have been collecting for a long time. And I'm just going to let her share a little bit about the collection with you and their thoughts when they were collecting. Is that cool? All right. So,
first of all, thank you for coming out. I'm just moved by such a large turnout. Thank you. Larry sends his regrets. He's a lawyer. He was called away for a client just a few days ago, so he's landing somewhere, or either taking off right now. But thank you. Most people and let me also thank. We call her a registrar, Vicki Val there, who put this book together and who keeps a record of all the art we have, because we have like 500 pieces. And so about 5 years ago, we gave 100 pieces to the University of Georgia Museum. And we endowed a curator because we felt like with a state with a population of 30% black at least, should have a representation of work by African American artists in their collection. So they do, and it's always special when you go and you visit and you show you're there to see that kind of support. People do ask us, and I hope I don't talk too long because I want to talk about what you see here, but how we got started. Who are we, first of all? Well, Larry is from Hannibal, Missouri. His mom was a cook. His dad was a railroad switchman. My mother was a nurse, and my dad was a tailor. And so we always say we've come a long way from that part of the country. But we didn't, no one in our family had an eye for art. And I think that we look back, and for Larry went to a school in Culver Stockton in Missouri. And he had a professor, actually a white professor, who invited him to his home, and he shared his collection with him. So when Larry and I married, a few years into our marriage, he said, Brenda, let's consider collecting. And so that was our introduction. In addition to that, those of you who may be lawyers or no lawyers, we belong to a firm in Atlanta called King & Spalding. And we were a part of the art committee, and we had a couple, Bob and Lou Steve, who were so kind to us and would always bring us into their homes and show us their collection. She had Alice Neal's and all Lamar Dodds and all those, and so it was really inspiring to see it. One more thing I want to say about our collecting was that in Atlanta, we have 4 or 5 African American schools. One was the Clark Atlanta University campus. And Hale Woodruff was an artist. He's not represented here. But in the 40s, Hale Woodruff wanted to have a competition so that African Americans could compete because of Jim Crow, they weren't allowed to compete anyplace else. And one of the first things I read historically, when you would put your name up for a WPA project or any project, they would ask them, what have you won? And since you couldn't enter a competition, so the only way they could say they'd won something was to compete with other artists of color. And so the good news that came from that is that Clark Atlanta has one of the finest collections of art in the country. And one of the things that I've had to learn, and I hope we will appreciate when we leave tonight, is that we used to just call it African American art, but it's really American art. And what you'll see and what you're hearing in a lot of the papers, the newspapers and the art journals, is that there's been a gap in American art. And the gap is, for years, African American art wasn't included. And now people are trying to reach back, pulling in. So what Larry and I have done over the years is we've tried to develop a collection of artists who are historically important. That means they're not living anymore for most of them. And artists who are living. Because if you only collect the dead artists, then many of them will, and many of those those artists died poor without being recognized. So you want to support living artists too. So we have a collection that's a combination. We have a combination. So one of the things I hope that you also get when you leave here is that, I think Betty Saar says it, that African American artists create art that's conceptual, abstract. You'll see abstract works here, you'll see figurative works here, you'll see works by folk artists. Anything that artists are doing, they're doing. And there's no other, and you can't look at a piece and say it's about an African American. You know, we almost say it the wrong way. It should be art about African Americans rather than African American art. But you get the point I'm saying. And so what you have here tonight are works that we've collected for 40 years. These works are part of a rotation. They really weren't hanging in our house. They were in storage. And so it shows you what an addiction, what an addiction we have. But it's the only addiction they say that will not kill you. People often ask you how you choose to work. And for us, what we're doing is, you know, if you hear Aretha Franklin or Ray Charles or just any country and Western art, you know their sound. And so what we're looking for is a visual sound. We want to see artwork that I can see what an artist is trying to say, even if it's abstract, but I want to see that that same sound is in other works. So we're looking for that, and that's hard. But we are looking for, and one of the things we used to say is that we can enjoy a choral music, but we also love a Georgia football game. So some of the things you see will be very peaceful, and some will be right in your face. But we try, it's a mixture of things. We prepared these little books, and I don't know if you have them, but I just kind of want to say a few things about some of the artists here. So when you look at them again, usually in museums you'll have a label, but I just want to kind of tell you one or two things that you might see. And so you'll know, let me say that most of the artists here have been trained. They're either masters, or they have a degree. The only folk artist you'll find is the piece right in back of you by James Malone is a folk piece. And Malone was really, he changed the name of that piece more than one time. He once called it the Bible Lady, and then he called it Give Me Jesus. So you know how you are as artists. Sometimes you'll think that this is not the right name. The other folk piece that we have is the piece by an artist actually from Brunswick area. Ernest Butts. And I don't know much about him other than he got to meet him, but I think it's a beautiful piece, composition-wise. It's very, very lovely. The piece here is by Stephanie Jackson, and she's a professor at the University of Georgia. She did the pieces on the cover of this little book, and she's just an amazing draftsperson, just an amazingly talented artist. This gentleman is called Christian. He's a retired educator, and one of the fun things, and he did is really a collage. And as we were transporting it, we lost the 2, so we called him, and it's called the Lottery 832. And so we were missing that, and we called him. He said he gave us permission to find another 2, and we sent him a picture of he was okay with it. Bernard Ross is an artist out of Illinois, and he was really, I think, important because he did a lot of social realistic work. And if you look him up on the, if you Google him, there is someone has one of his paintings, and you know what is the auction company that goes around and they'll give you an appraisal of work. It's one of the, it's something related to Sotheby's. But anyway, if you put his name in, you'll see where someone's appraising his work. So this is really interesting. The piece behind you is artist, and what is his full name? I forget sometimes myself. It's, what does it say? William Artis. Now, one thing I think is significant about William Artis that I'd like you to note is there is a show going on at the Cummer Museum in Jacksonville. It's about a woman named Augusta Savage. And Augusta Savage was a black sculptor from the Jacksonville area. And Mrs. Comer recognized her talent even back 50, 70 years ago. So they did a show about her work. And what happened, because again, blacks weren't allowed to train, Augusta Savage had artists like William Artis, who she trained. And so what the Comer has done is they focused in on Augusta Savage's work, but then they put her in context. And the context are the students that she taught. And he's one of them. And so he does mostly realistic work, but as you can see, there's a kind of elongation to him. And if you get to the Comer, you'll see there's a terracotta head of his. It has that same elongation. And that's part of his voice. This work is by David Driscoll. And the importance of David Driscoll is a fine artist. But I wrote in the book that it's an etching, but it's really a lino cut, and I made that mistake. But I just want to comment on him because he's so important. In the 70s, David Driscoll wrote a book called 200 Years of African American Art. And the work was so beautiful that it really changed the whole way that work was accepted by museums. You can't reject it. When you see the beauty of it, you can't reject it. So he was, and the show started in Los Angeles, and he was the one that curated it. I called him a day and I said, David, I made a mistake. I put your work down as an etching instead of a lino cut. And you're so lovely. He said, don't even worry. It's hard to tell the difference. So he's just a charming man. I don't want to go through every one. Let me see if there's anything over here.
Brenda, tell me about Lovers.
Lovers, okay.
Yes.
It's by Ernest Critchlow. And Critchlow was also one of Augusta Savage's students. What he's doing is he was always noted for doing social commentaries. And the commentary in the 40s and that period was on the racism that attached. So here you find a man with his KK suit on, and he calls it Lovers because it's kind of in your face. They weren't lovers, but it makes you think a while when you see it. It's a very small piece, one of the smaller ones in the collection, but it's very powerful. The piece right there is by a woman that I'm very fond of named Camille Billups. And Camille is known as a printmaker. This is a print. She's known as a draftsman. She colors more than she paints. And she does ceramics, but she also does film. And this is from a film she did called the KKK Boutique. It ain't just for rednecks. Now Camille is a black feminist. She's in your face, and her whole point of it is that if we're not careful, we all, whether we are liberal or conservative, whatever, black or white, we could all pull a little bit of racism and play it when we want to play it. And that's what she's talking about in that piece. Anything else? Again, over here you see a drawing by Stephanie Jackson. So let's go into the, and I did the big piece over there, the Durr. Okay, let's go into it. I didn't? Okay. Where are you going to put it? You just know that you like it. And I'll be very frank with you. We've only been able to have 2 panels together in my house. This is the first time we've gotten all 3. And sometimes we'll rotate it. But Milton Durr, whenever you see his work, he's a very well-trained artist, lives in Boston. And they say he's expressionistic and impressionistic, but what he almost always has is in the background you'll see the landscape, and then you put the people in front, foreground the people. And that's pretty much his voice. You know his work because you see the colors and you see what he's doing. There's always some kind of other scene in the back, and then the foreground has people. And I love the colors in it. What else is there? Let's go into the other room.
Yeah, if they're relief from all the other
socially conscious. He was really speaking to the problem that African Americans had to deal with. And he puts it in your face. And this is a print, and this same image is in the Smithsonian collection. This is Emma Amos. Amos is an Atlanta artist, though she has lived most of her life in New York. Here again, she deals with the whole issue of the Confederate flag right there in your face. Again, this is an artist named Willie Birch, and what Birch is saying is that he calls it the promised land. And as you see, people went to the north, but it wasn't always the perfect place. It was not a promise. It wasn't what they thought it was. But so people, you see the drugs and the poverty and all the issues. So they were still challenging even folks who went north. Kevin Cole is an arts educator who's retired and does a lot of really big pieces. If you go to the airport and on Concourse F, I can't tell you just where it is, but you'll see his work there. This is an interesting piece because it's by an artist named A.B. Jackson. And A.B. Jackson attended Yale University Art School in 1949, then came back and got his master's in 52. But he always did work that was really, this is a very skillful drawing, perfectly done. He has something that a claim to fame now that you may not know. His grandson plays football. And his name is Russell Wilson. Funny. This is Haywood Ubry, and Ubry was again one of these multi-talented artists who actually, this is a print, but this is in the Smithsonian Portrait Collection, and he was known for his ceramics, his sculpture, as well as his painting. It was probably done in the 40s. I believe this is a restrike of what he did at Iowa. A lot of the artists who are older were actually educated at Iowa. Iowa had a very open enrollment about accepting African Americans, so several of them were educated there. This is a postman who finished his degree. This is Ron Adams. And Ron Adams is a master printmaker. He pulled for Jasper Johns, for Charles White, for Biggers, just a really amazing printmaker, and just a very skilled at what he was doing. Beside him is Bob Blackburn, and Blackburn had a school called the Printmaking Workshop out of New York, and taught so many people, including Camille Billups that I showed you earlier with the KKK Boutique. He taught her how to print. So all these folks are kind of connected in a way. This is one of my favorites. His name is Emmanuel Hughes. He's a very well-trained artist. But instead of doing the typical still life that artists will do, he decides to do old things. And old kind of romantic things. I think it's kind of a nice way of looking at it. I think the last two that we'll talk about are over here. The piece here is by Freddie Styles, who's an Atlanta artist. And Freddie is special because he's also a gardener. And what he does is, he will sometimes, and this is maybe one of them, he will use the roots from outside, and he'll use that as his paintbrush. So this is a combination of roots and paintbrush. A very, very talented man. And my last one is Larry Walker. And Larry, this is a nursing home study he did. It's a very provocative piece. It's almost just sad. It's painful. It's a piece that's fun. It's interesting that my husband and I can't always agree to hang, because for my husband, it's painful to see it. And for me, I think it's beautiful, but he doesn't always see it that way. So we don't always hang it for him. It's a nursing home study.
Oh, wow.
And you can almost,
Talk about it.
yes, a nursing home study. And Larry Walker was the head of the art department at Georgia State. Very respected artist, very accomplished. His daughter is Carol Walker, those of you who keep up with contemporary art. So, at any rate.
Do you have any Carol Walker?
I do. These were pieces that were here. and I didn't have to bring from Atlanta. We don't worry, we have a problem with our we can't. But I do have Kara Walker. She's a very challenging artist, but very talented as well.
Amazing collection. You collected William Thompson.
We have one William Thompson.
I do too.
No, I love his work. I don't know if he's fully appreciated, but I do like his work. Anything? Anything else? Anyone else? A question or anything? Yes.
Where do you look for art?
You know, that's hard. It's getting harder and harder. When Larry and I were first collecting, we were really focused on preserving African American art historically. And so we went to the centers where those artists painted. We went to Atlanta was one center, New York, Chicago, and we didn't get to LA, and we didn't get to Cleveland. But we had to have someone and Philadelphia. So we had someone in New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago who would help us. But it's really hard. Now, I just recently found someone in Cleveland, because there was a Caribou House, it's Caribou House in Cleveland. So we did find that. Now, where we go for more contemporary artists, we'll go to auctions. We're always following some artists, but it's by introduction. Tonight I met a sculptor here, and I've heard about him named Kevin. And the nice thing is that other artists will introduce you to people. So it's always by word of mouth, but you really have to work hard. And the thing you have to be careful of is you buy what you like, but you need, if you're going to collect it, but you need to educate your eye. And that means going to museums, and I don't care if it's African American work, whatever work, good work is good work. And you really need to educate your eye, and that's what it's for. We have a couple of Radcliffe Baileys. We know him as a student. He's gotten a little expensive now.
Yeah.
How do you know Radcliffe?
Well, from way back when, and I wish I had bought it.
I know.
And I remember when he was first showing in Atlanta.
For those of you who don't know Radcliffe Bailey, when you go to the East Concourse in Atlanta, as you're going down the escalators, look up and you'll see a collage. It's beautiful. Have you seen it? It's all about Atlanta, the King family, barbershops.
Yeah.
You've seen it. That's Radcliffe Bailey.
Did you see that from the HOV land?
And Larry Walker is in the International.
It's really. I
Yeah,
didn't know
he's
that.
got some beautiful work, figurative work in charcoal in the International.
I didn't know that. You know, one artist we didn't bring because there were two that I thought about bringing. One was Benny Andrews, and he is a Georgia artist, and he's fabulous as well. I don't know if his works at the Atlanta airport, but if you go to Washington, D.C., to Reagan, you'll see, once you're on the Delta side getting your luggage, look up, and you'll see this beautiful, almost beautifully painted work by Sam Gilliam. So, and the good thing about Atlanta, if I jump back, is that Atlanta has really done a good job of making sure that artists of color are included at the airport. And some artists have actually said to me, I wish where they live that they had been as inclusive. But Atlanta's done a good job of that.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
Yes, I do.
And we should.
And we should. And we should. Anything else?
It's great.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Nice job.
He's knowledgeable about everything.
Yeah.